Previous lesson, we saw a little bit of how you can have more than one item into your JSON object. And mind you, they can get fairly complex because we can add in values as objects. We can also add in arrays. So if you're familiar with JavaScript, you know that arrays have those square brackets. And there's a lot of really cool tools online as well that can help you build out your JSON object. So you're not alone, and there's a lot of resources out there. So by default, when we look at this, we see that, so this is a tool at mb21github.io, and this is a great resource to just practice JSON, building out more complex JSON objects. And then of course we've got our JSON lint here where we can try it out and just make sure that it is a valid JSON object. So I've cleared out the code, I've left just those curly brackets, and we're all ready to go to build out a new person. So this time we've got a starting point here. So Joe Miller, they've got an address. And what we want to do is, so we've got address, and as we saw before, we can have multiple values here. So we can have another text value, city, and this one could be in Toronto. And just add that one in. And you can see that it adds it in. So same format, where what we're doing is we're just comma separating out those values. So there's a comma there, and next one is address. And then this address has a nested object in it again. So pretty neat that we can put objects and then we can put another object if we had multiple values for the address. So we could have multiple address values here and so on. So we could really build that out. And then there's another one down here for hobbies. So hobbies is actually an array. So we've got two items in the array. So let's grab Joe Miller and let's dump them into our person, and we'll take a closer look and see what's being output there. The way the array works is we can have multiple items there in the array, the address, and then using the console, we can read through all of the data really easily. And if ever we did want to return back any of this information, again, it's person, and we can do address if we want, and then that comes back as an object. Let's do address, and this time let's do city. So we can return back the city. So we have access to all that data. And that's how easy it is to work with JSON, because this data is just so super easy to access. You don't really have to go through a lot of parsing or sifting through it. You can really easily see it here within your console and then access it just by using the typical JavaScript object selection, where we've got the parent, then we've got the child, and then we've got the next child, and then all the way down. So if we had multiple levels here of hobbies going in further and further and further, we could pull back all of that information. And the other thing that I wanted to show you in this lesson is the array. So we saw here that this is new, that we've got ability to do an array as well. And the really neat thing about arrays here is that we can loop through and we can have multiple hobbies here. And that is also an important thing when you're working with JSON, that you have some kind of standard with the data that you're returning. So if you can have a possibility such as hobbies, and I'm going to create another one as well, and we're going to list that one out, and we're going to make that even more complex because we're going to have a bunch of objects in there. So we'll do something like cars. Maybe Joe Miller has several cars, and each one of those cars is a different make. It's got a different year. So we'll build that out as well. So that's going to be the challenge for this lesson. But for now, if we want to return back those hobbies, how do you think that that works? So we could do person. We know that they have hobbies. And this one comes back as an array. And if you're familiar with JavaScript, you know that arrays start at 0. So to get back the first item in the array, we do 0. And to get back the second item, we do 1. So there we go. So we can return back that information just as easily. And of course, we can also update it as well. So if his hobby changes, and this is, again, where JavaScript, it's just so easy to work with these objects. We can update those values. So maybe one of his hobbies is swimming. So I'm not sure if swimming is a hobby, but there we go. We can update that one to swimming. And now if I do person, we can see that this person, their hobby has changed. And instead, they're just doing stuff. So instead of dreaming, they're swimming now. So try this out for yourself. Build a more complex object. And the challenge is to add in a value for cars. Now you can do that within that builder here, or you could just build that out from scratch within your console. So let me show you how to do that. So we know that from up here, from address, we can have more complex array objects. And all we have to do, so we've got everything is comma separated out. So hobbies is another object here, but it's got an array value here. So this one, to return back that array, we know that we saw that we can return that back in hobbies. And this time, let's do cars. And our cars, so for now, let's just do one value for cars, and then we'll update that. So let's see what this looks like back in the console. Always love working with this console. So when we go cars, we see that we've got the one item there. And if we want to have multiple cars, we can do it within this type of format. So let's do an array. So just like the hobbies array, same idea. So make is Mustang. And let's turn this into an object with the curly brackets. And this is an interesting one because now we've got curly brackets inside of the square brackets inside of the curly brackets. So pretty cool. We're really building this down multiple levels deep. So we've got our cars. Our first car is an object, so make Mustang. And let's add in some more properties into there. So maybe the year, and let's make it a 2018. And let's do one more, color. So there we go. So we've got our car, and then we've got some details about the car. But what if Joe has another car? This is where I want you to pause the video and add in one more car into this cars array. And I'll show you how to do that coming up. Let's open up our editors, and we see that in cars, so this is an array, we've already added the one car, and to add in a second one, we can just comma separate that out. So now I've copied it and duplicated it, and this is a thing to keep in mind when you are building out your JSON objects. Try to keep the format the same. So if I'm using make here, don't go use model in the other one. It's just going to be very complex and hard to return back those values. What you want to do is have an ideal situation like this where you can loop through it. You can easily get back these values, and you can add additional values as well. Because the whole idea is that you want to pull back this data, and you want to make it fairly easy and seamless to pull back this data. So the more uniform and more standard you make your JSON object, the easier it's going to be to pull this back. Because now I know that if I'm looping through my person, cars is uppercase, so if I'm looping through person cars, I've got two items within that array, and I can pull back the first item, and if I just want the make of the first item, I can do something like that. And if I want the make of the second item, we see how it's sequential there, I can pull back that value as well. And that's only because I've given it the same format. So keep that in mind when you are building out these more complex JSON objects. And then always, of course, if it's not outputting properly here, you're getting thrown some errors, go into a JSON lint, validate it, make sure that the format is correct. So try it out for yourself, add in a bunch more cars, give Joe a few more cars that he can have, and also add in a few hobbies and update his address as well. Try it out for yourself. Next lesson, we're going to get into more complex working with these values in JavaScript.